Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving straight into something seriously cool today. We're going to take a fascinating look under the hood of enterprise web security to demystify VMware Workspace ONE Remote Browser Isolation, or RBI for short. We'll explore exactly how this massive, heavy-duty technology protects giant organizations, but we're also going to evaluate some agile, cloud-native alternatives built for the rest of us. Let's get right into it. Here's how we're going to tackle this today. First up, the web security problem. Then, we'll look at how pixel rendering works, explore the VMware ecosystem, talk about enterprise costs and deployment, and finally, look at cloud alternatives. All right, part 1, the web security problem. So, to make sure we're all on the exact same page, let's talk about what Remote Browser Isolation, or RBI, actually is. Basically, this is the practice of executing all of your browser activity inside isolated cloud containers. The whole goal here is making sure malicious code literally never touches your actual device. I want you to think of this like a digital air gap. Instead of your own laptop doing the heavy, risky lifting of loading a sketchy website, a totally disposable container out in the cloud does all the dirty work for you. It's a physical and logical gap between the Wild West of the internet and your safe corporate network. And well, why do we even need that air gap? Because letting websites render directly on your device, that's opening the front door to drive-by malware downloads, sneaky phishing sites trying to steal your credentials, unpatched zero-day exploits, fingerprint tracking, and session hijacking. These aren't just theoretical buzzwords, you know. These are the exact mechanisms hackers use to breach massive networks every single day.
Moving on to part 2, how pixel rendering works.
Okay, let's walk through the life cycle of one of these isolated sessions. It's actually a really fascinating 6-step process. First, you, the user, initiate a browsing request, like clicking a link. Second, a gateway steps in, intercepts that request, and routes it far away from your device. Step 3, an isolated Linux container sitting out in the cloud actually loads and renders that content. Now, step 4 is where the magic really happens. That rendered web page is converted into a compressed pixel stream. It's kind of like watching an interactive video feed of the website. Step 5, only those safe pixels are delivered to your screen. No HTML, no JavaScript, just pixels. And finally, step 6, when your session ends, that container, along with any nasty malware it might have bumped into, is completely wiped out, destroyed. It's a brilliant, continuous cycle of isolation and elimination.
But hey, streaming all those pixels doesn't just happen by magic, right? It takes some serious infrastructure. For VMware's RBI to run effectively, you're looking at needing about 1 to 5 megabits per second of bandwidth for every single concurrent user. Standard reading might sit on the lower end, but heavy media-rich sites, they need the high end. So if you've got 1,000 employees online all at once, you absolutely need the network pipes to handle that constant stream of pixels.
Which brings us to a really important trade-off in this space. We need to compare VMware's pixel streaming with a competing philosophy called DOM mirroring. VMware takes the fully rendered page and turns it into a visual stream. This gives you absolute maximum isolation because literally zero code hits your endpoint. But the catch? It introduces higher latency. Every single click has a round-trip delay. DOM mirroring, on the flip side, takes a sanitized version of the web page's document object model and reconstructs it on your device. This feels way snappier, with much lower latency for interactive stuff, but you sacrifice a tiny bit of that absolute isolation because some code is technically being transmitted. It's the classic tug-of-war between ironclad security and flawless user experience.
All right, section 3, inside the VMware ecosystem. Now, RBI doesn't just operate in a bubble. In the enterprise world, it's all about massive synergy. VMware's RBI talks directly to Workspace ONE UEM, that's Unified Endpoint Management. So say a device suddenly falls out of compliance, bam, it's automatically pushed into far stricter browser isolation. It also hooks up with Workspace ONE Access for seamless single sign-on. Then you've got Workspace ONE Intelligence looking at risk scores to make smart, real-time adaptive security decisions. And if you're using Carbon Black EDR, endpoint detection and response, it can actually use endpoint telemetry to instantly trigger browser isolation the second it spots compromise indicators. It is a wildly interconnected, highly automated web of defense.
But wait, what about downloading files during an isolated session? Well, that's where CDR, Content Disarm and Reconstruction, steps in. CDR essentially strips out active, potentially dangerous elements from your downloaded files, things like hidden macros or embedded scripts. But here's the kicker. It completely preserves the document's actual functionality. You still get your PDF or your Excel spreadsheet, but the weaponized payload, totally neutralized up in the cloud before it ever reaches your device.
To manage all of this beautifully complex tech, IT teams get some incredibly extensive administrative controls. They can set up URL categorization, deciding exactly what to allow, what to flat-out block, and what to isolate. They can use role-based isolation, meaning your finance team or the C-suite might have way stricter rules than everyone else. On top of that, they can create device and location-aware policies and even implement granular session controls. We're talking exact restrictions on whether a user is allowed to copy-paste, upload files, or even print from an isolated session. The precision here is just incredible.
Moving to Section 4, the cost of enterprise security.
So you might be thinking, all this enterprise power sounds amazing, but it definitely comes with a really heavy lift. We are talking about a major multi-month rollout process. Weeks 1 and 2, that's purely reviewing the architecture. Then you've got weeks of integration and setting up SSL inspection, followed by weeks of designing policies and URL rules. After that, you do a pilot deployment to tune things. And finally, you reach a phased organizational rollout by week 12. It is a serious 3-month project that requires a dedicated IT team to properly execute.
And when you break down the financial and operational friction points, it becomes crystal clear why VMware is strictly playing in the enterprise space. They require a minimum of 500 users, a dedicated security squad, and that massive 8 to 12-week deployment time we just talked about. All of that pushes the annual total cost of ownership well north of $60,000 to $120,000. Contrast that for a second with cloud alternatives like Sendwin. With them, you can literally start with one single user. There's zero admin overhead required, you deploy it in minutes, and it costs a tiny fraction of the big enterprise setups.
Which brings us perfectly to our final part, Section 5, Cloud Alternatives for Small Teams.
Smaller organizations are facing what we call the enterprise gap. Because let's face it, hackers do not care how big your company is. Small businesses, freelancers, fast-moving startups, they all face the exact identical threats as the Fortune 500, but they obviously cannot meet a 500-user minimum requirement, and they certainly lack the IT staff for a 12-week deployment. What they actually require is instant-on access, flexibility like multi-account management, and above all, affordable cloud-native isolation. This gap makes lightweight alternatives an absolute market necessity today.
To impartially summarize who exactly each platform is built for, VMware RBI is definitively best for enterprises with 500+ users who are already heavily invested in Workspace ONE and who absolutely need heavy compliance reporting and hybrid cloud capabilities. On the flip side, tools like Sendwin are custom-built for individuals and smaller, agile teams under 100 users. They need instant, affordable browser isolation without ever dealing with infrastructure management. They are solving the exact same core problem, but for entirely different scales.
The source material actually sums up this entire dynamic perfectly. Quote, VMware RBI is a powerful enterprise solution, but its enterprise-only pricing and complex deployment make it inaccessible to individuals. Sendwin bridges this gap. I think that hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures the huge divide between these heavy-duty enterprise ecosystems and the emerging class of lightweight cloud tools making this tech accessible.
Which leaves us with a final, rather provocative thought to end our explainer today. If enterprise-grade security takes months to deploy and costs 6 figures, are the rest of us just inherently less safe out there? Or is the future of cybersecurity just lightweight and cloud-native? Think about how your own organization scales its security. I really hope this structured look at remote browser isolation has given you some great insights. Keep learning, stay curious, and we will catch you in the next explainer.